My name is Mark, and I'm a 45-year-old engineer. My life, at least on the surface, seemed perfect. I had a successful career, a beautiful home, 2 wonderful kids, and a wife, Jenna, whom I thought was my soulmate. But as I sit here now, recounting the events that have led me to this moment, I realize how deceived I was. Jenna and I met 8 years ago, a few months after my divorce from my first wife, Emily. Our relationship was a whirlwind romance, filled with passion and excitement. Jenna was everything I thought I wanted, smart, funny, and seemingly devoted to our family. But looking back, I realized there were signs I chose to ignore. My job often required me to travel. As an aerospace engineer, I was frequently sent on business trips to oversee projects, attend conferences, and meet with clients. These trips were essential for my career and provided well for my family. However, they also meant I was away from home more than I liked. I tried to make up for my absences by being as present as possible when I was home. I coached my son's soccer team, helped my daughter with her science projects, and always made sure to plan special date nights with Jenna. I believed our relationship was strong enough to withstand the time apart. But I was wrong. It all started about 6 months ago. Jenna had been acting differently, and while I chalked it up to stress or boredom, a nagging feeling in my gut told me something was off. She was more distant, often lost in thought, and seemed less interested in spending time together. When I confronted her about it, she brushed it off, saying she was just tired or had a lot on her mind. I wanted to believe her, so I did. Then there were the phone calls and texts. Jenna had always been protective of her phone, but lately it seemed to be glued to her hand. She would often step out of the room to take calls, claiming it was just her friends or work. I tried to trust her, but the secrecy was unsettling. One evening, while I was packing for another business trip, I noticed Jenna was particularly anxious. She kept checking her phone and seemed distracted. I asked her if everything was okay, and she snapped at me, saying she was just stressed about work. It was unlike her to be so short-tempered, but I let it go, thinking she might need some space. As I drove to the airport the next morning, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. I decided to keep a closer eye on things when I returned. Little did I know, the truth was far worse than I could have imagined. A few weeks later, I was scheduled to attend a conference in Denver. It was a 3-day trip, and I planned to fly back on a Friday evening. Jenna seemed more relaxed than usual, even encouraging me to go and not worry about things at home. Her sudden change in demeanor only heightened my suspicions. During the conference, I couldn't focus. My mind kept drifting back to Jenna and the uneasy feeling that had been growing inside me. I decided to cut my trip short and take an earlier flight home. I wanted to surprise Jenna and maybe ease some of my worries. When I arrived home that Thursday afternoon, the house was unusually quiet. Jenna wasn't expecting me until the next day, so I figured she might be out running errands. I decided to check my email and unwind a bit before she returned. As I walked into our bedroom, I noticed Jenna's phone on the nightstand. It was unlocked, and a text message from an unfamiliar number popped up on the screen. Curiosity got the better of me, and I read the message. "Can't wait to see you tonight. I've missed you." My heart sank. I scrolled through the messages, feeling a mix of anger, betrayal, and disbelief. The texts were explicit, filled with plans for secret meetings and professions of love. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. My wife was having an affair. Determined to find out who the other man was, I looked through the call logs. One number appeared frequently, and when I searched it online, my blood ran cold. It was Kevin, my divorce attorney from my first marriage. The man who had helped me through one of the darkest periods of my life was now betraying me in the worst possible way. I felt a surge of rage and heartbreak. I knew I had to confront Jenna, but I needed to gather more evidence first. I spent the rest of the day in a daze, going through the messages and piecing together their affair. It had been going on for months, right under my nose. That evening, Jenna came home, smiling and cheerful. She was completely unaware of what I had discovered. I played along, pretending everything was fine, while inside I was seething. I needed a plan. I couldn't let her know I was onto her until I had all the information I needed. Over the next few days, I continued to collect evidence. I installed a GPS tracker on her car and set up a hidden camera in our bedroom. I wanted to catch them in the act, to leave no doubt about her betrayal. And then one Friday evening, my worst fears were confirmed. Jenna had told me she was going out with friends, but I knew better. I watched the footage from the hidden camera and saw them together in our bed, the place where we had shared so many intimate moments. The pain was unbearable, but I knew what I had to do. I confronted Jenna the next morning. I showed her the evidence, laid out all the messages, and told her I knew everything. She tried to deny it at first, but the proof was undeniable. She finally broke down, admitting to the affair but trying to justify it by blaming me for being away so often. The confrontation was heated, filled with yelling, tears, and accusations. I felt a mix of anger, sadness, and a deep sense of betrayal. How could she do this to me, to our family? But the most shocking revelation was yet to come. When I demanded to know how she could betray me with Kevin, she looked at me with a twisted sense of satisfaction and said, "Because he understands me in ways you never could." Those words hit me like a ton of bricks. The man who had once been my ally was now my enemy. I realized then that there was no saving our marriage. The trust was shattered, and the woman I had loved and devoted my life to was nothing but a liar and a cheat. In that moment, I made the decision that would change everything. I was going to file for divorce. Jenna could have Kevin, but she wouldn't have me, and I would make sure she paid for her betrayal. The decision to divorce Jenna was a turning point, but it was also the beginning of a long and painful process. I knew I had to protect myself and my children, and I needed to find a new attorney, someone I could trust implicitly. I contacted an old friend, Tom, who specialized in family law. He had always been straightforward and reliable, and I knew he would have my back. When I called Tom, I kept my emotions in check, focusing on the facts. He listened patiently, asking the right questions and offering his support. I told him about Kevin and Jenna, and he agreed to take my case. We scheduled a meeting for the following day to discuss the details and plan our strategy. That night was one of the longest of my life. Jenna stayed in the guest room, and the silence between us was deafening. I could hear her crying through the walls, but I felt no sympathy. My mind was racing with thoughts of our children, the house, and the life we had built together. I knew that everything was about to change, and I needed to be strong for the sake of my kids. The next morning, I dropped the kids off at school and headed to Tom's office. As I walked in, he greeted me with a firm handshake and a reassuring smile. "Mark, it's good to see you," Tom said. "I'm sorry it has to be under these circumstances." "Thanks, Tom," I replied, taking a seat across from him. "I appreciate you helping me with this. I don't know where else to turn." "Don't worry, we'll get through this together," he said, opening a file on his desk. "Tell me everything from the beginning." I took a deep breath and recounted the events of the past few months, the suspicions, the evidence, and the confrontation. Tom listened intently, taking notes and asking clarifying questions. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair, deep in thought. "Well, you've certainly got a solid case," he said finally. "The evidence is clear, and Jenna's infidelity is undeniable. We need to gather a bit more documentation, but this is a strong start." "What about Kevin?" I asked. "He's an attorney, and he's been involved in this mess. Can we do anything about that?" Tom nodded. "We can file a complaint with the State Bar Association. His behavior is not only unethical but also illegal. He could face serious consequences for his actions." The thought of Kevin facing repercussions brought me a small measure of satisfaction. At least he wouldn't get away with betraying me so easily. We spent the next few hours discussing the details of the divorce, from the division of assets to custody arrangements for the kids. Tom was thorough and methodical, making sure we covered all the bases. By the time I left his office, I felt a sense of relief. It was a small step, but it was a step forward. When I returned home, Jenna was waiting for me in the living room. Her eyes were red and puffy, and she looked exhausted. "Mark, can we talk?" she asked softly. I sat down across from her, keeping my expression neutral. "What do you want to talk about?" "I know you're angry, and you have every right to be," she began, her voice trembling. But please, let's try to work this out. For the kids' sake, if nothing else. Her plea for reconciliation only fueled my anger. How dare she ask for forgiveness after everything she had done? I took a deep breath, trying to keep my emotions in check. Jenna, it's too late for that, I said firmly. I've already spoken to an attorney, and I'm filing for divorce. This marriage is over. Tears streamed down her face, and she looked at me with desperation. But Mark, I made a mistake. I was lonely and frustrated, and Kevin was there for me. Can't we at least try to fix this? Her words cut through me like a knife. The audacity of her trying to justify her betrayal was infuriating. I stood up, unable to contain my anger any longer. A mistake? Jenna, this wasn't a one-time lapse in judgment. You carried on an affair behind my back for months, with a man who was supposed to help me through my first divorce. You lied to me, to our kids, and to yourself. There's no fixing this. The trust is gone, and so is any chance of us staying together. Jenna broke down, sobbing uncontrollably. I walked out of the room, unable to bear the sight of her tears. I needed space, time to think and plan my next steps. Over the next few days, I focused on the logistics of the divorce. I gathered financial records, documented our assets, and made arrangements for temporary custody of the kids. Jenna tried to talk to me several times, but I kept my distance. The emotional toll was too great, and I needed to stay strong for the sake of my children. One evening, as I was sorting through paperwork in my office, my son, Jake, came in. He was 12, old enough to sense that something was wrong. "Dad, is everything okay?" he asked, his eyes filled with worry. I put down the papers and pulled him into a hug. "Jake, there's something I need to tell you. Your mom and I are going through a tough time right now, and we're going to get a divorce." His eyes widened, and I could see the confusion and fear in his expression. "But why? What happened?" I struggled to find the right words. "Sometimes adults make mistakes and things don't work out the way we hope. But I want you to know that your mom and I both love you and your sister very much. This isn't your fault, and we'll always be here for you." Tears welled up in Jake's eyes, and he hugged me tightly. "I love you, Dad." "I love you too, buddy," I whispered, feeling a lump in my throat. "And we're going to get through this. I promise." The conversation with Jake was one of the hardest things I've ever had to do. Explaining the situation to my daughter Emily, who was only 8, was even more challenging. She didn't fully understand what was happening, but she could sense the tension and sadness in the house. As the days passed, the reality of the divorce began to sink in. Jenna and I barely spoke, communicating only when necessary about the kids or household matters. The atmosphere was tense, and every interaction felt strained and awkward. One afternoon, while Jenna was out, I received a call from Tom. He had some updates on the case and wanted to meet to discuss the next steps. We agreed to meet at a local coffee shop, a neutral ground where we could talk freely. When I arrived, Tom was already there, a folder of documents in front of him. He greeted me with a nod and gestured for me to sit. "Mark, I've got some good news and some bad news," he said, getting straight to the point. "The good news is that we have enough evidence to file a strong case for divorce on grounds of adultery. Jenna's infidelity and Kevin's involvement are well documented." I nodded, feeling a mix of relief and apprehension. "And the bad news? Kevin's a slippery character. He's already trying to cover his tracks, and he's likely to fight back hard. We need to be prepared for a tough legal battle." I sighed, the weight of the situation pressing down on me. "I expected as much. What do we do next?" Tom outlined our strategy, emphasizing the importance of staying calm and collected throughout the process. He reassured me that we had a solid case and that we would fight to ensure the best possible outcome for me and the kids. As I left the coffee shop, I felt a renewed sense of determination. The road ahead would be challenging, but I was ready to face it head on. Jenna had made her choices, and now it was time for me to make mine. Back at home, the tension continued to simmer. Jenna tried to engage me in conversations, but I kept my responses short and to the point. I couldn't let my guard down, not after everything that had happened. One evening, after the kids had gone to bed, Jenna cornered me in the kitchen. She looked exhausted, her eyes red from crying. "Mark, please, can we talk?" she pleaded. I sighed, feeling a pang of guilt. Despite everything, part of me still cared for the woman I had once loved. "Fine. What do you want to say?" She took a deep breath, her hands trembling. "I know I've hurt you, and I can't undo what I've done, but I'm begging you, let's try to find a way to co-parent peacefully, for the kids' sake." Her words struck a chord. As much as I despised her actions, I couldn't deny that we needed to find a way to make things work for Jake and Emily. I nodded slowly, choosing my words carefully. "I agree that we need to focus on the kids. They deserve stability and love, even if we can't provide that together. But Jenna, this doesn't change anything between us. I'm moving forward with the divorce, and you need to accept that." Tears streamed down her face, but she nodded. "I understand. I just want us to be civil, for their sake." "We will be," I assured her. "But you need to start being honest, Jenna. No more lies, no more secrets. If we're going to co-parent effectively, we need to trust each other, at least when it comes to the kids." She nodded again, wiping her tears. "I promise, Mark. No more lies." As she walked away, I felt a sense of closure. The pain was still there, but I knew I had made the right decision. The road ahead would be difficult, but I was ready to face it, for myself and for my children. The following weeks were a blur of legal consultations, emotional confrontations, and trying to maintain a semblance of normalcy for the kids. Each day felt like a balancing act, trying to keep my emotions in check while ensuring Jake and Emily felt secure and loved. Tom had been instrumental in guiding me through the legal process. He had filed the necessary documents, and we were now waiting for the initial hearing. Jenna, on the other hand, was a wreck. She oscillated between moments of desperate pleading for forgiveness and angry outbursts, trying to place the blame on me for her infidelity. One evening, while I was helping Jake with his math homework, the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone, so I was cautious as I walked to the door. When I opened it, I found Kevin standing there, looking disheveled and anxious. "Mark, we need to talk," he said, his voice strained. I felt a surge of anger but kept my composure. "What the hell are you doing here, Kevin?" "Please, just hear me out," he pleaded. "I need to explain." I glanced back at Jake, who was watching us with wide eyes. "Go to your room, Jake. I'll be there in a minute." Jake nodded and hurried upstairs. I stepped outside, closing the door behind me, and faced Kevin. "Explain? You think there's anything you can say to justify what you've done?" I hissed, trying to keep my voice low. "Mark, I know I've messed up. I never meant for things to get this far," he said, looking genuinely remorseful. "Jenna and I, it just happened. We were both vulnerable, and one thing led to another." "Vulnerable? Is that what you call it?" I snapped. "You took advantage of my wife while pretending to be my friend. Do you have any idea how much damage you've caused?" Kevin ran a hand through his hair, clearly struggling to find the right words. "I'm sorry, Mark. I really am. I know that's not enough, but I don't know what else to say." "You're right. It's not enough," I said, my voice cold. "Stay away from my family. If you come near us again, I won't hesitate to take legal action." He nodded, looking defeated. "I understand. I'll stay away." I turned and walked back into the house, slamming the door behind me. My hands were shaking, and I took a few deep breaths to calm myself before going upstairs to check on Jake. He was sitting on his bed, looking worried. "Dad, who was that?" he asked. "It was no one important, buddy," I said, forcing a smile. "Just someone I used to know." He seemed to accept my answer and returned to his homework. I sat with him, trying to focus on the math problems, but my mind was racing. The confrontation with Kevin had left me feeling unsettled, but it also strengthened my resolve. I was more determined than ever to see this divorce through and protect my family from further harm. A few days later, Tom called with an update. We had a court date for the initial hearing, and he wanted to go over the final details of our case. We met at his office, where he laid out our strategy and the evidence we had gathered. "Mark, we're in a strong position," Tom said, looking confident. "Jenna's infidelity and Kevin's involvement give us a solid case. We'll push for a fair division of assets and primary custody of the kids." I nodded, feeling a sense of relief. "Thanks, Tom. I appreciate everything you're doing." "We'll get through this," he assured me. "Just stay focused and keep your emotions in check. The court will be looking at how both of you handle this situation, especially when it comes to the kids." The hearing date arrived faster than I expected. Jenna and I sat on opposite sides of the courtroom, each with our respective attorneys. The tension was palpable, and I could see the stress etched on Jenna's face. As the proceedings began, the judge reviewed the evidence and listened to our arguments. Tom presented our case with precision, highlighting Jenna's infidelity and the impact it had on our marriage. He also emphasized my role as a devoted father and the steps I had taken to ensure the well-being of our children. Jenna's attorney, on the other hand, tried to downplay her actions, focusing instead on my frequent absences due to work. The judge listened carefully, asking questions and taking notes. After what felt like an eternity, he made his preliminary ruling. We were granted a temporary separation with joint custody of the kids. A final decision on the division of assets and permanent custody would be made after further hearings and evaluations. As we left the courtroom, Jenna approached me. "Mark, I know this is hard, but can we try to keep things civil for the kids?" I looked at her, seeing the pain and regret in her eyes. "I'll do my best, Jenna, but this doesn't change what you've done. The kids come first, and that's all that matters now." Over the next few weeks, we settled into a new routine. Jenna moved into a rented apartment nearby, and we established a schedule for the kids. It was awkward and uncomfortable, but we managed to keep things civil for their sake. I focused on my work, trying to stay busy and keep my mind off the divorce. One evening, I received a call from Jenna. She sounded upset, and I could hear the kids arguing in the background. "Mark, can you come over? The kids are fighting, and I can't seem to calm them down," she said, her voice strained. I sighed, feeling a pang of frustration. "I'll be there in a few minutes." When I arrived at Jenna's apartment, I found Jake and Emily in the middle of a heated argument. Jenna looked exhausted, clearly struggling to manage the situation. I stepped in, separating the kids and trying to calm them down. "Hey, what's going on here?" I asked, looking between them. "Jake took my tablet," Emily shouted, tears streaming down her face. "I didn't take it. I was just borrowing it," Jake protested. "All right, let's all take a deep breath," I said, trying to maintain a calm tone. "Jake, give Emily her tablet back. Emily, it's okay to share, but Jake should have asked first." They both reluctantly agreed, and the tension in the room began to dissipate. Jenna watched with a mixture of relief and gratitude. "Thank you, Mark," she said softly. "I don't know what I'd do without you." I nodded, feeling a mix of emotions. "We're in this together, Jenna, for the kids." As I left her apartment, I couldn't shake the feeling of sadness and loss. Despite everything, there was still a part of me that missed the life we had shared, but I knew that moving forward was the only option. A few days later, I received a call from Tom. He had some updates on the case and wanted to meet to discuss our next steps. We met at his office, where he laid out the latest developments. "Mark, we've made some progress," he said, looking pleased. "The State Bar Association has opened an investigation into Kevin's conduct. This could have significant implications for our case." I felt a surge of satisfaction. "That's good to hear. What's the next step?" "Well, continue to gather evidence and prepare for the final hearing," Tom explained. "In the meantime, try to stay focused and keep things as stable as possible for the kids." I nodded, feeling a sense of determination. The road ahead was still uncertain, but I was ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. One evening, as I was tucking Emily into bed, she looked up at me with wide eyes. "Daddy, will things ever go back to the way they were?" I felt a lump in my throat, struggling to find the right words. "I don't know, sweetheart, but no matter what happens, I promise that Mommy and I will always love you and your brother. We'll always be here for you." She nodded, hugging her stuffed animal tightly. "I love you, Daddy." "I love you too, Emily," I whispered, kissing her forehead. "Good night." As I left her room, I felt a sense of resolve. The journey was far from over, but I was determined to protect my children and ensure they felt loved and secure. The pain of Jenna's betrayal was still raw, but I knew that with time we would heal and find a new sense of normalcy. The final confrontation with Jenna came a few weeks later. We were at home going over the details of the custody arrangement when the conversation took a heated turn. "Mark, I know you're still angry, but can't we at least try to be friends?" Jenna asked, her voice tinged with desperation. I looked at her, feeling a mix of anger and sadness. "Friends? Jenna, you betrayed me with someone I trusted. You lied to me for months. How can you expect me to just forget that?" "I don't expect you to forget," she said, her eyes pleading. "But we've shared so much together. Can't we find a way to move past this for the kids' sake?" I sighed, shaking my head. "I'll always be civil for the kids, but friendship? I don't think that's possible. Too much has happened." She looked devastated, tears welling up in her eyes. "I understand. I'm so sorry, Mark. I really am." I nodded, feeling a sense of finality. "I know you are, Jenna. But it's too late. We need to focus on moving forward and doing what's best for Jake and Emily." The conversation ended there, and we returned to discussing the practicalities of our new arrangement. The emotional wounds were still fresh, but I knew that with time, they would heal. The most important thing now was to ensure that our children felt loved and supported, even as our lives changed. As I lay in bed that night, I thought about the journey ahead. The divorce was far from over, and there would be many more challenges to face. But I was ready to face them, for the sake of my children and my own peace of mind. The road to healing was long, but I knew that with determination and support, we would get through this together. The next few months were a whirlwind of legal proceedings, emotional upheaval, and trying to keep some semblance of normalcy for Jake and Emily. Every day felt like a battle, but I knew I had to stay strong for my kids. Despite the tension, Jenna and I managed to maintain a civil relationship for the sake of the children. We stuck to our custody schedule, and I made a point of being as involved in their lives as possible. It wasn't easy, but I was determined to ensure they felt secure and loved. One Saturday afternoon, I took Jake and Emily to the park. It was a beautiful day, and I wanted to give them a break from the stress at home. As they played on the swings and slides, I watched them, feeling a mix of pride and sadness. They were resilient, but I could see the confusion and pain in their eyes. "Dad, can we get ice cream after this?" Jake asked, running up to me with a big smile. "Sure, buddy," I replied, ruffling his hair. "Let's go to your favorite place." As we walked to the ice cream shop, I thought about how much had changed in such a short time. The life I had known was gone, replaced by uncertainty and heartache. But I also felt a sense of hope. My kids were my world, and I was determined to give them the best life possible. When we arrived at the ice cream shop, we found a table outside and enjoyed our treats. Emily's face was covered in chocolate ice cream, and Jake was happily munching on his cone. For a moment, everything felt normal. "Daddy, do you miss Mommy?" Emily asked suddenly, looking up at me with wide eyes. The question caught me off guard. I took a deep breath, trying to find the right words. "Sometimes, Emily, but what matters most is that we both love you very much." "Are you and Mommy ever going to get back together?" Jake asked, his tone hopeful. I sighed, feeling a lump in my throat. "I don't think so, buddy. Sometimes things don't work out the way we hope. But your mom and I will always be here for you, no matter what." They seemed to accept my answer, and we finished our ice cream in relative silence. As we walked back to the car, I felt a mix of relief and sadness. The road ahead was still uncertain, but I was determined to face it with strength and resilience. Back at home, the atmosphere was tense as usual. Jenna and I communicated only when necessary, focusing on the logistics of co-parenting and the divorce proceedings. One evening after the kids had gone to bed, Jenna approached me in the living room. "Mark, can we talk?" she asked, her voice hesitant. I looked up from my book, feeling a surge of annoyance. "What is it, Jenna?" She took a deep breath, looking anxious. "I know things have been difficult, but I want to try to make this as smooth as possible for the kids. Can we at least try to be civil?" I sighed, putting my book down. "Jenna, I've been trying to be civil, but you need to understand that what you did has lasting consequences. It's not something I can just forget." "I know, and I'm sorry," she said, her eyes welling up with tears. "I never meant to hurt you like this." "Well, you did," I replied, my tone cold. "And now we have to deal with the aftermath. Let's just focus on the kids and getting through this divorce." She nodded, wiping her tears. "Okay, Mark. I'll do my best." The days turned into weeks, and the weeks into months. The legal proceedings dragged on, each hearing and negotiation feeling like a punch to the gut. But through it all, I tried to remain focused on my children and their well-being. One evening I was sitting in my office going through some documents when I received a call from Tom. He had some updates on the case, and I could tell from his tone that it was important. "Mark, I've got some news," he said, his voice serious. "The State Bar Association has completed their investigation into Kevin's conduct. He's been disbarred." A wave of relief washed over me. "That's great news, Tom. Thank you for letting me know." "There's more," he continued. "Jenna has agreed to a settlement. It looks like we can avoid a lengthy trial." I felt a mix of emotions, relief, anger, and sadness. "What's the settlement?" Tom outlined the terms: a fair division of assets, joint custody of the kids, and a reasonable alimony agreement. It wasn't perfect, but it was a step towards closure. "Thanks, Tom," I said, feeling a weight lift off my shoulders. "I appreciate everything you've done." "We're almost there, Mark," he replied. "Just a little longer, and you'll have a fresh start." The final hearing was scheduled for the following week. Jenna and I arrived at the courthouse, both of us looking exhausted and drained. As we sat across from each other waiting for the judge, I couldn't help but feel a sense of finality. The judge reviewed the settlement agreement, asking us both a series of questions to ensure we understood the terms. After what felt like an eternity, he nodded and signed the documents. "Congratulations, Mr. and Mrs. Thompson. Your divorce is finalized," the judge said, his tone neutral. As we left the courtroom, Jenna turned to me. "Mark, I hope one day you can forgive me." I looked at her, feeling a mix of anger and sadness. "Maybe someday, Jenna, but for now, I just need to focus on moving forward." We parted ways, and I drove home, feeling a sense of emptiness. The divorce was final, but the emotional scars were still fresh. I knew it would take time to heal, but I was determined to rebuild my life and create a stable environment for my children. Over the next few months, I focused on my work and my kids. I threw myself into projects at the office, finding solace in the familiarity of my job. At home, I made an effort to spend quality time with Jake and Emily, creating new routines and traditions to help them adjust to our new reality. One evening, as we were sitting down for dinner, Jake looked up at me with a thoughtful expression. "Dad, do you think things will ever be normal again?" he asked. I paused, considering his question. "I think things will be different, Jake, but that doesn't mean they can't be good. We just have to find a new normal." He nodded, seeming to accept my answer. Emily chimed in, her eyes bright. "I like our new normal, Daddy. We get to spend more time together." Her words warmed my heart, and I smiled. "Me too, Emily, me too." As time passed, the pain of Jenna's betrayal began to fade. I still had moments of anger and sadness, but they were less frequent. I focused on the positives: my children, my career, and the support of friends and family. One afternoon, I received a call from an old friend, Mike. He had heard about the divorce and wanted to catch up. We met for coffee, and it felt good to talk to someone who understood what I was going through. "Mark, I'm really sorry to hear about everything," Mike said, his tone sincere. "But I know you're strong. You'll get through this." "Thanks, Mike," I replied, feeling a sense of gratitude. "It's been tough, but I'm doing my best." We talked for hours, reminiscing about old times and sharing stories about our lives. It was a reminder that despite the challenges, I had a network of support to help me through. As the months turned into a year, I found a new sense of normalcy. Jenna and I managed to co-parent effectively, putting aside our differences for the sake of the kids. I started dating again, slowly rebuilding my confidence, and opening myself up to the possibility of new relationships. One evening, as I was tucking Emily into bed, she looked up at me with a thoughtful expression. "Daddy, are you happy?" she asked, her voice soft. I smiled, feeling a sense of peace. "Yes, Emily, I'm happy, and I'm even happier because I have you and Jake." She hugged me tightly, and I felt a surge of love for my children. Despite the pain and heartache, I had come out stronger on the other side. I had found a new normal, one that was filled with love, hope, and the promise of a better future. As I lay in bed that night, I thought about the journey I had been through. It had been a long and difficult road, but I had emerged stronger and more resilient. The scars of Jenna's betrayal would always be there, but they no longer defined me. I had found a new sense of purpose and a renewed commitment to being the best father I could be. The emotional impact of the past few years had been immense, but it had also taught me valuable lessons about love, trust, and the importance of resilience. I knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, I was ready to face them with strength and determination, for myself and for my children. The emotional roller coaster of the divorce had finally started to level out. As the dust settled, I began to focus more on my future and what I wanted my life to look like moving forward. I had survived the storm, but it was time to rebuild. Jenna and I maintained a cordial co-parenting relationship. Despite everything, we both wanted the best for Jake and Emily. We worked out a schedule that allowed us to share custody evenly, and we made a point to communicate openly about the kids' needs and activities. It wasn't easy, but we managed to find a rhythm that worked for us. One weekend, I took the kids on a camping trip. It was something I had always wanted to do, and I felt it was the perfect way to create new, positive memories for us. We drove up to a beautiful state park, set up our tent, and spent the days hiking, fishing, and roasting marshmallows by the campfire. As we sat around the fire on our last night, Jake looked up at me. "Dad, I had a lot of fun this weekend. Can we do this again sometime?" "Absolutely, buddy," I replied, feeling a warmth in my heart. "We can make this a new tradition." Emily chimed in, her eyes sparkling with excitement. "I love camping, Daddy. Can we bring Mom next time?" Her question caught me off guard, but I managed to keep my composure. "Well, see, Emily, for now, let's just enjoy our time together." The trip was a turning point for me. It made me realize that while the past had been painful, the future held so much potential. I was ready to embrace new experiences and create a positive, fulfilling life for myself and my children. Back at home, I continued to focus on my career and personal growth. I took on new projects at work, finding satisfaction in the challenges and achievements. I also started taking better care of myself, hitting the gym regularly, and reconnecting with old friends. It felt good to reclaim my life and rebuild my confidence. One evening, I received a call from Jenna. She sounded nervous, and I could tell something was on her mind. "Mark, can we meet for coffee? There's something I need to talk to you about," she said. I agreed, curious about what she had to say. We met at a quiet cafe, and Jenna looked more composed than she had in months. "Mark, I know we've had our differences, but I want to apologize again for everything I've put you through," she began, her voice sincere. "I've been seeing a therapist, and it's helped me realize a lot about myself and my mistakes." I nodded, appreciating her honesty. "I'm glad to hear that, Jenna. Therapy can be really helpful." She took a deep breath, looking down at her coffee. "I've been thinking a lot about our co-parenting arrangement, and I want to make sure we're doing everything we can to support the kids. I was hoping we could attend a co-parenting counseling session together." Her request surprised me, but I saw the sincerity in her eyes. "I think that's a good idea, Jenna. If it helps us communicate better and support Jake and Emily, I'm all for it." We scheduled a session with a counselor who specialized in co-parenting. The sessions were challenging at times, forcing us to confront our issues and find ways to work together more effectively. But they were also incredibly rewarding. We learned how to communicate more openly and respectfully, always keeping the kids' best interests at the forefront. As the months passed, I noticed a significant improvement in our interactions. We were able to attend school events, parent-teacher conferences, and family gatherings without the tension that had once plagued us. It was a small victory, but it felt like a major step forward. One afternoon, as I was picking the kids up from school, I ran into an old friend, Lisa. We had known each other since college but had lost touch over the years. She was now a teacher at the school, and we quickly fell into an easy conversation. "Mark, it's so good to see you," Lisa exclaimed, giving me a warm hug. "How have you been?" "I've been good, Lisa. It's been a tough few years, but I'm finally finding my footing again," I replied, feeling a sense of nostalgia. We exchanged numbers and agreed to catch up over dinner. As we reconnected, I found myself drawn to her warmth and kindness. We started spending more time together, and it wasn't long before our friendship blossomed into something more. Lisa was a breath of fresh air in my life. She was supportive, understanding, and genuinely cared about my kids. Jake and Emily adored her, and it felt like a piece of the puzzle I hadn't realized was missing had finally fallen into place. One evening, as we were sitting on my porch watching the sunset, Lisa turned to me with a thoughtful expression. "Mark, I know we've both been through a lot, but I want you to know that I'm here for you, no matter what." Her words touched me deeply. "Thank you, Lisa. You've brought so much happiness into my life. I'm grateful for you every day." We continued to build our relationship, taking things slow and allowing ourselves to heal from our past experiences. Lisa's presence in my life was a source of strength and comfort, and I found myself looking forward to the future with renewed hope. The finalization of the divorce brought a sense of closure, but it also opened the door to new possibilities. I had come a long way from the shattered man who had discovered his wife's betrayal. I was stronger, more resilient, and ready to embrace whatever life had in store for me. One afternoon, as I was walking in the park with Lisa and the kids, Jake ran up to me, holding a small bouquet of wildflowers. "Dad, these are for you," he said, his eyes shining with love. I took the flowers, feeling a lump in my throat. "Thank you, Jake. These are beautiful." Emily joined in, hugging my leg. "We love you, Daddy." "I love you too," I said, my voice filled with emotion, "and I always will." As we continued our walk, I felt a sense of peace and contentment. The road had been long and difficult, but I had found my way through the darkness. I had built a new life for myself and my children, filled with love, hope, and the promise of a brighter future. The decision to move forward had been the hardest part, but it was also the most important. I had chosen to focus on the positives, to rebuild my life, and to embrace the new opportunities that came my way. And in doing so, I had found a happiness I hadn't thought possible. The journey wasn't over, but I knew that with the support of my loved ones, I could face whatever challenges lay ahead. And for the first time in a long time, I felt truly hopeful about the future. As the sun set on that beautiful day in the park, I looked at my children and Lisa, feeling a deep sense of gratitude. I had come a long way from the man who had discovered his wife's betrayal. I had found strength, resilience, and the courage to move forward. And in the end, that was what mattered most. The journey through betrayal, heartache, and rebuilding had been long and arduous, but I finally felt like I was on solid ground again. My life, though changed, had found a new rhythm, and I was embracing it wholeheartedly. Jake and Emily were adjusting well to the new family dynamics. They were happy, doing well in school, and seemed to have accepted Lisa into their lives with open arms. Lisa was incredible with them, and seeing her bond with my kids was heartwarming. One evening, after a family dinner, we were all sitting in the living room playing a board game. Laughter filled the room as Jake made a funny face, trying to get Emily to guess the word on his card. Lisa and I shared a look, both of us smiling at the scene before us. It was moments like these that made all the struggles worthwhile. The simplicity of being together, the joy of shared laughter, and the comfort of knowing we had each other's backs. It was the life I had dreamed of, even if it had come about in a way I hadn't expected. A few weeks later, I received a letter in the mail from the State Bar Association. Kevin's disbarment was confirmed, and he was facing additional legal repercussions for his unethical behavior. It was a small victory, but it felt like a closure to that painful chapter. That same evening, Jenna called. She wanted to discuss the final arrangements for the holidays, ensuring we had a clear plan for the kids. Our conversations had become more straightforward and businesslike, focused on co-parenting and the well-being of Jake and Emily. "Mark, I know it's been a tough year," she said, her voice softening. "But I think we're doing a good job with the kids. They seem happy." "Yes, they do," I agreed. "And that's what matters most." There was a pause on the line before she spoke again. "I just want you to know that I'm truly sorry for everything. I hope one day you can forgive me." I took a deep breath, feeling a mix of emotions. "Jenna, I don't know if I'll ever be able to fully forgive you, but I've moved on. We're doing our best for the kids, and that's what's important now." She seemed to accept my response, and we ended the call on a civil note. It was another step towards healing, another piece of the past put to rest. The holidays were a mix of old traditions and new ones. Jake and Emily split their time between my house and Jenna's, and we made sure to create special moments with them. Lisa joined us for Christmas, and it felt like our little family was complete. One night after the kids had gone to bed, Lisa and I sat by the fireplace sipping hot cocoa. The glow of the fire cast a warm light, and the air was filled with a peaceful silence. "Mark, I wanted to talk to you about something," Lisa said, her voice hesitant. I turned to her, curious. "What is it?" She took a deep breath, looking into my eyes. "I know we've been taking things slow, but I want you to know that I'm all in. I love you, and I love the kids. I want to be a part of your life, fully and completely." Her words took me by surprise, but in the best possible way. I reached out, taking her hand in mine. "Lisa, you have no idea how much that means to me. I love you too. You've brought so much joy and stability into our lives. I can't imagine my life without you." We sat there holding each other, the weight of the past lifting off our shoulders. It was a moment of pure happiness, a confirmation that we were moving in the right direction. As the new year approached, I reflected on everything that had happened. The betrayal, the heartbreak, the struggle to rebuild. But through it all, I had found strength, resilience, and a new sense of purpose. I had learned to trust again, to open my heart to new possibilities, and to cherish the moments that truly mattered. One afternoon, as I was cleaning out the garage, I stumbled upon an old photo album. Flipping through the pages, I saw pictures of happier times with Jenna, our wedding day, the birth of our children, family vacations. It was a bittersweet reminder of what had been lost, but also of how far I had come. I decided to put the album away, not out of bitterness, but as a symbol of moving forward. The past was part of my story, but it didn't define my future. I had a new life, filled with love, hope, and the promise of brighter days. A few weeks later, as I was preparing dinner, Jake and Emily burst into the kitchen, excitedly waving a piece of paper. "Dad, look! We made a family tree at school, and we included Lisa!" Emily exclaimed, her eyes shining with pride. I took the paper, my heart swelling with emotion. There, among the branches and leaves, were all our names, including Lisa's. It was a beautiful symbol of our blended family, a testament to the love and unity we had created. "This is wonderful, guys," I said, pulling them into a hug. "I'm so proud of you." Lisa walked in, seeing the paper and smiling. "You two did a great job. It looks amazing." Jake and Emily beamed, and in that moment I felt a deep sense of gratitude. We had been through so much, but we had come out stronger on the other side. Our family, though unconventional, was filled with love and support. The next few months flew by in a blur of activities and milestones. Jake scored his first goal in soccer, Emily won a prize at the science fair, and Lisa and I continued to grow closer. We talked about the future, about our hopes and dreams, and I felt a sense of excitement about what lay ahead. One evening, as we were sitting on the porch watching the sunset, I turned to Lisa. "You know, I never thought I'd find happiness again after everything that happened. But you, Jake, and Emily have shown me that it's possible. You've given me a new lease on life." She smiled, her eyes filled with love. "Mark, you deserve all the happiness in the world, and I'm so grateful to be a part of your life." As the sun dipped below the horizon, I felt a profound sense of peace. The journey had been long and difficult, but it had led me to this moment, to a life filled with love and hope. I had learned that no matter how dark things seemed, There was always a light at the end of the tunnel. In the end, the betrayal and heartbreak were just chapters in my story. They had shaped me, taught me valuable lessons, and ultimately led me to a place of healing and renewal. I had found a new sense of purpose, a new love, and a new life, and for that I was truly grateful.